That sentence still doesn't feel real when I say it out loud. Yet I lived it. Every quiet second, every empty seat, every unanswered expectation. I remember standing at the front of the chapel, hands folded tightly together, staring at 42 neatly arranged chairs that were supposed to be filled with family, friends, and the people my husband had loved for decades. Instead, they sat empty, accusingly silent, like witnesses to a truth I never wanted to face. The memorial was scheduled for 11 in the morning. By 10:45, I already knew. No hurried footsteps. No whispered greetings. No familiar laughter drifting through the doors. Just me. And the chairs. My husband, Richard, believed in showing up. He showed up to every school event when the kids were young. Every recital, every parent-teacher meeting, every game. Even when work left him exhausted. He showed up for neighbors, friends, extended family. If someone needed help moving, fixing something, or simply listening, Richard was there. He believed presence mattered more than words. I believed that too. Until the day his absence revealed how little his presence had been valued. Richard didn't die suddenly. His illness was slow, cruel, and relentless. Cancer has a way of shrinking worlds, and ours became smaller with every passing month. Hospital rooms replaced family dinners. Medical charts replaced holiday plans. Our children, 3 of them, all grown, visited at first. Briefly, awkwardly, then less and less. They were busy. Careers. Families of their own. Commitments they claimed couldn't be moved. Richard noticed, even when he pretended not to. "They'll come around," he used to say, forcing a smile. "They just don't know how to handle this." I wanted to believe him. In his final weeks, Richard asked one thing. "Just make sure they're there," he whispered one night, his voice barely audible. "I don't need anything fancy. I just want them there." I promised him they would be. I shouldn't have. After he passed, I planned everything carefully. Nothing extravagant. Just dignified. Respectful. Exactly what Richard would have wanted. I called each child personally. "I'll be there," my eldest said. "Of course," said another. "We'll figure it out," the youngest replied. I heard the hesitation but chose hope over instinct. I sent reminders. Details. Times. Locations. 42 chairs were set up based on confirmations, not just from our children but from relatives and family friends they had assured me would come with them. I trusted them. The morning of the memorial, I arrived early. The air felt heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. The staff asked if I wanted music playing softly. I nodded, though I barely heard it. I kept checking the door. 10 minutes past 11, nothing. 20 minutes, still nothing. Then my phone buzzed. A text. "Running late." Another buzz. Something came up. Then the final one, from my eldest. "We won't make it. We already paid for brunch. Please understand." Brunch. Another message followed shortly after. "We had a tea time booked weeks ago. Dad would have wanted us to enjoy life." I read that message 3 times. Dad would have wanted us to enjoy life. At his memorial, the service went on anyway. The officiant spoke kindly. Shared stories Richard would have smiled at. He talked about loyalty, integrity, and love. The kind that doesn't ask for recognition. I sat alone in the front row. Every empty chair behind me felt louder than words. Those chairs weren't just empty seats. They were missed birthdays. Unreturned calls. Years of emotional distance that had quietly accumulated. And now they were unavoidable. It wasn't just that they didn't come. It was how easily they chose something else. Golf. Brunch. Convenience. Over the man who taught them how to ride bikes. Over the father who worked late so they could have more. Over the husband who loved them even when they barely noticed. That realization cut deeper than grief. People assume moments like this end in tears. Mine didn't. Something inside me shifted instead. I stopped waiting. Stopped expecting. Stopped excusing. And for the first time, I saw my children clearly, not as the people I raised, but as the people they had chosen to become. As the memorial ended and the last echoes of the service faded, I stood up slowly. I thanked the few strangers who had come. I nodded politely to the staff. And as I walked out past those 42 empty chairs, I realized this day wasn't just about Richard's death. It was about the truth I had avoided for years. And once seen, it could never be unseen. For more inspiring and heart-touching stories like this, please subscribe to our channel. After the memorial, the chapel emptied quickly. People always say grief lingers in silence, but that day, silence felt deliberate, chosen, as if the world had decided that Richard's life had already been filed away, completed, closed, and no longer requiring attention. I stayed behind longer than necessary, watching the staff fold programs and stack chairs that no one had used. 42 chairs reduced to neat piles in minutes. It struck me how easily absence is cleaned up. No one asks where the missing people were. They just move on. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light seemed to pause just a little too long, as if it wanted me to sit with what had happened. I expected my phone to ring. An apology. An explanation. A realization. Even a late one. Nothing came. No calls. No follow-up messages. No acknowledgement of what they had missed. That silence hurt more than their absence at the memorial. The house felt wrong without Richard. Not empty, just unfamiliar. Like furniture had been moved slightly, enough to trip you if you weren't paying attention. His shoes were still by the door. His jacket hung where he always left it, pockets full of old receipts and folded notes. I picked up the jacket and held it for a long moment. This was the man my children chose golf and brunch over. The thought settled heavily in my chest. In the weeks that followed, grief didn't explode. It narrowed. It became focused. Less about missing Richard. More about seeing the truth I had avoided for years. I replaya moments primers on missa. The skipped holidays. The rushed phone calls. The way visits always felt like obligations instead of connections. I had blamed distance, time, modern life. But now I saw something else. Choice. I stopped making excuses for them. They're busy turned into they don't prioritize this. They'll come eventually turned into they choose not to. They don't mean it turned into they know exactly what they're doing. And once I stopped excusing, something strange happened. I felt lighter. 2 weeks after the memorial, my eldest finally called. Her voice was careful, measured. I heard the service went fine, she said. Fine. Yes, I replied. It did. There was a pause. We meant to come, she added quickly. It just didn't work out. I waited. She expected reassurance, understanding, forgiveness. Instead, I asked one question. Did you think about him that morning? Another pause. Of course. Enough to change your plans? Silence. That silence told me everything. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, thank you for calling, and ended the conversation. Because I had learned something important. People reveal their priorities without words. Near the end, Richard once said something that hadn't made sense at the time. Some people only love you when it's easy, he whispered. I brushed it off then. Now I understood. Disappointment is different from anger. Anger burns. Disappointment settles. It rearranges how you see people. I stopped reaching out. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. I didn't block them. I didn't make dramatic announcements. I just stopped trying. Birthdays passed. Holidays came and went. Sometimes they invited me. Last minute, loosely planned, casual. Stop by if you're free. I noticed the pattern. Richard was gone, and with him went their obligation to show effort. I declined politely. Each time it felt easier. One evening, sitting alone at the dining table, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't lonely. I was grieving, but I wasn't alone. I had spent years centering my life around people who treated my presence as optional. Richard never did that. And honoring him meant I couldn't keep doing it either. So I set a boundary. Not spoken, not announced, but firm. I would no longer chase people who didn't show up, emotionally or otherwise. That boundary changed everything. My children didn't notice the shift at first. They were used to me accommodating, adjusting, waiting. But when I stopped doing those things, the distance became visible. And visible distance makes people uncomfortable. Are you upset? Did we do something wrong? You seem different. I answered honestly. Yes. Yes, and I am. But I didn't explain further. They already knew. The memorial felt like an ending. But it wasn't. It was the moment the truth surfaced, quietly, unmistakably. And now that it had, there was no returning to how things were. Something had shifted permanently. And the real reckoning was only beginning. Distance doesn't announce itself all at once. It reveals itself slowly, through unanswered messages, postponed plans, and conversations that never quite reach the heart of what needs to be said. After Richard's memorial, that distance stopped hiding. It stood openly between my children and me, no longer disguised as busyness or circumstance. And once I saw it clearly, I couldn't ignore it. The shift they didn't expect. For years, I had been the constant. The one who called first. The one who adjusted schedules. The one who said, "It's okay, I understand." Even when I didn't. When I stopped doing that, it unsettled them. They were used to my availability, not my absence. So when weeks passed without me checking in, without me initiating plans, confusion crept in where certainty used to be. The group message. It started with a group message. Casual, light, almost careless. Thinking of doing brunch this Sunday. Anyone in? No mention of Richard. No acknowledgement of the memorial. No awareness of how that word brunch still echoed painfully in my mind. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. "I won't be coming," I typed. "But I hope you enjoy yourselves." The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Are you upset?" one asked. I put my phone down. When silence is an answer, silence can be cruel, but it can also be honest. I didn't respond that day. Not because I didn't have words, but because I finally understood something important. I had spent years explaining myself to people who were committed to misunderstanding me, and I was tired. 2 weeks later, my middle child showed up unannounced. She stood at the door with an awkward smile and a bag of pastries, as if sugar could soften what we both knew needed to be addressed. "I was in the area," she said. I let her in. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The same one where Richard and I used to drink coffee every morning. She avoided looking at his empty chair. "You've been distant," she said carefully. "I've been quiet," I replied. "There's a difference." She sighed. "We didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said. "But intent doesn't erase impact." She looked surprised by that. "I just don't understand why you're pulling away now," she added. That's when I finally said it. Because I spent years leaning in. She didn't argue. Instead, she sat there quietly, absorbing something she had never considered before. That relationships require balance, and I had been carrying most of the weight alone. "You could have said something," she murmured. I nodded. I did. In 100 small ways. Explaining requires the other person to be listening. I wasn't sure they ever had been. When Richard was alive, I softened everything. Protected everyone from discomfort. I thought that was love. Now I knew better. Before she left, she said, "I'm sorry about the memorial." Her voice wavered. It was the first apology I had heard. I accepted it, but something didn't shift the way she expected. Because apologies don't rewind time. And some moments, once missed, are gone forever. Word traveled quickly. Calls followed. Messages. Questions. "Why didn't you say how much it mattered?" "We didn't realize it was that serious. We thought you understood." I answered honestly. "I did understand," I said. "That's why it hurt." When people are used to unlimited access to you, boundaries feel like rejection. I learned that slowly, painfully, through the way my children began to react. Not with anger at first, but with confusion disguised as concern. They didn't see my boundaries as self-respect. They saw them as punishment. Each of them separately asked some version of the same thing. "Why are you doing this?" They meant my distance. My refusal to smooth things over. My unwillingness to return to how things were. I answered the same way every time. "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm doing something for myself." That answer unsettled them more than anger ever could. I realized then that they didn't miss me. They missed the version of me who absorbed discomfort so they didn't have to. The mother who filled silences. Who forgave without acknowledgement. Who showed up even when she wasn't shown up for. That version of me was gone. One evening, my eldest called. His voice was tense, controlled, but strained. "This feels like you're keeping score," he said. I closed my eyes. "I kept score for years," I replied quietly. "I just never said it out loud." There was a long pause. "That's not fair," he finally said. "No," I agreed. "But it is honest." Honesty disrupts comfort. It exposes patterns people rely on. And when those patterns benefit them, honesty can feel like betrayal, even when it's simply truth. "I didn't think it mattered that much," he said. "Dad wouldn't have wanted a fuss." That sentence cut deeper than he realized. "You don't know what your father would have wanted," I said. "Because you didn't ask. You didn't show up." The line went quiet. Showing up isn't just physical presence. It's prioritization. It's sacrifice. It's choosing something meaningful over something convenient. They chose convenience. And that choice had consequences. A month after the memorial, all three of them came together. That alone told me something had shifted. They sat in my living room, the same one where Richard's photo still rested on the shelf. None of them spoke at first. Finally, my youngest said, "We messed up." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rehearsed. But it was real. "I'm sorry we made you feel alone," she continued. "And I'm sorry we made Dad feel optional." Optional. That word hit hard. Richard had never been optional to me. "I'm not asking you to live in the past," I said. "I'm asking you to respect what mattered." They nodded, but I wasn't sure they fully grasped it yet. Understanding isn't instant. It grows. They looked uncomfortable, ashamed, even. The old me would have rushed to reassure them. "It's okay. I understand. Let's move on." But I didn't. Because growth needs space. And sometimes discomfort is the teacher. For the first time, I wasn't managing their emotions. They were sitting with them. That was new. My eldest asked quietly, "What do you want from us now?" I didn't answer immediately. I thought about it carefully. "I want consistency," I said. "Not gestures. Not apologies. Presence. Not grand gestures. Not dramatic promises. Just showing up, again and again." And I respected that. Because promises are easy. Change is not. After that visit, things didn't magically improve. But they became more intentional. Calls weren't rushed. Plans were made earlier. Effort was visible, even if imperfect. And for the first time, I wasn't carrying everything alone. Grief stripped me down. It showed me what I could survive. And once you know that, you stop tolerating what you should. Sometimes I imagine what Richard would say now. Not much. He was never one for speeches. But I know he'd be proud that I finally chose honesty over harmony. Even with progress, something remained unresolved. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And trust, once cracked, rebuilds slowly. I was willing to try, but I wasn't willing to pretend. Family doesn't automatically mean closeness. It means effort. And effort, when it's real, is visible. My home felt quieter these days, but not empty. Peace had replaced tension. And though the loss still ached, I no longer felt invisible within it. There was still one final reckoning ahead. Not with my children, but with myself. Because setting boundaries is one thing. Learning how to live peacefully within them is another. For most of my adult life, being needed had been my identity. I was needed as a wife, needed as a mother, needed as the one who held everything together. When that need faded, when silence filled spaces once occupied by responsibility, I didn't immediately feel free. I felt untethered. After my children left that evening, the house settled into a familiar stillness. Not the heavy silence of grief. A different one. A silence that asked questions instead of echoing loss. Who was I now, when no one required me to fix anything? I caught myself waiting. Waiting for calls. Waiting for plans. Waiting to be included. That habit was hard to break. Because for years, my worth had been measured by my usefulness. Grief doesn't just mourn what's gone. It exposes what was unhealthy. I saw how often I had postponed my own needs. How easily I had minimized my feelings to keep peace. Not out of weakness. Out of love. But love without balance slowly erodes the self. One morning, I woke up without an agenda. No appointments. No obligations. Just time. That scared me. Then it didn't. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the light stretch across the floor. For the first time in years, the day belonged to me. I found a box in the hallway closet, old notebooks, photos, half-finished projects. Things I had loved before life became about everyone else. I picked up a sketchbook. My hands remembered what my mind had forgotten. My children didn't comment on my new routines. They didn't ask what I was doing with my time. And that stung briefly. Then I realized something important. I didn't need to be witnessed to be valid. I stopped offering immediate solutions. When someone complained, I listened, but I didn't fix. That was new, uncomfortable, liberating. I began saying no, not defensively, calmly. I can't do that. That doesn't work for me. I need rest today. The world didn't collapse. Relationships adjusted. Or they didn't. And either way, I survived. Loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of self. As I became more present in my own life, the loneliness softened. One afternoon, I took a long walk. No destination, no music. Just the sound of my steps. I realized I hadn't been this alone with myself in decades. And I liked the person I was meeting. The shift didn't go unnoticed forever. My eldest commented, "You seem different." I smiled. "I am," I said. "And I'm okay with it." He didn't ask for more. That was enough. Richard was still with me, but differently now. Not as a wound. As a memory woven into who I was becoming. I spoke to him sometimes, not in sadness, but in gratitude. Independence isn't isolation. It's choice. The ability to give without losing yourself. The strength to stand alone without resentment. There were offers. Friends suggesting trips. Family suggesting distractions. I declined most of them. I wasn't avoiding life. I was finally listening to it. My days found a rhythm. Simple. Unrushed. I cooked when I felt like it. Read without interruption. Rested without guilt. This wasn't emptiness. This was peace. I stopped asking, "Do they need me?" and started asking, "What do I need?" That shift changed everything. Some distance creates clarity. It shows you what connections are based on obligation and which ones are based on mutual respect. I wasn't closing myself off. I was opening myself inward. And from that place, I could choose connection again, without fear. I had survived loss. I had survived disappointment. And I was still here, whole. That realization carried more power than anything I had lost. One final chapter was waiting. Not dramatic. Not confrontational. But necessary. Because healing isn't complete until peace replaces resentment. And I was almost there. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. People think it's an event. Something that happens once, neatly, with relief and closure. For me, it was a process. Slow. Uneven. Quiet. And it didn't look the way anyone expected it to. Subtle suggestions began to surface. "You seem stronger now. I think it's time to move forward. Your kids are trying. Doesn't that count?" They meant well. But forgiveness, I learned, is not something you rush to make others comfortable. Forgiveness was not pretending the memorial didn't matter. It was not minimizing the empty chairs. It was not rewriting history to protect anyone's image. Forgiveness did not erase accountability. Forgiveness was choosing not to carry bitterness into the rest of my life. Not for them. For me. One afternoon, while organizing old paperwork, I came across Richard's handwriting, notes scribbled in the margins of a calendar. Appointments. Reminders. A simple note beside one date. Check in with the kids. It made me smile. Not ache. That's when I knew I was ready to let go of anger. Anger burns hot, but it exhausts itself. It demands energy. And I was done feeding it. When my eldest invited me to lunch, I agreed. Not out of obligation. Out of openness. We sat across from each other, sunlight filling the space between us. No tensión. No riger speeches. Just two people trying again. "I'm not angry anymore," I told him. He looked relieved, too relieved. "But that doesn't mean things are the same," I added. That part landed differently. "Will you forgive us?" he asked. I considered it carefully. I already have, I said. But forgiveness isn't access. He nodded slowly. I could see him understanding, perhaps for the first time. Forgiveness did not reopen doors I had intentionally closed. It simply removed the resentment attached to them. I could be kind without being available. Similar conversations happen later. Less emotional. More grounded. They didn't ask for absolution. They asked for clarity. And clarity I could give. I still think about that day, my youngest admitted. So do I said. But it doesn't hurt the same anymore. That was true. Grief doesn't disappear. It transforms. From pain into memory. From loss into meaning. I noticed something unexpected. I could talk about Richard without my voice breaking. I could remember him without feeling abandoned. He had become part of my foundation, not a fracture in it. It wasn't dramatic. No tears. No declarations. Just consistency. Calls that came when nothing was needed. Visits that weren't rushed. Presence without expectation. That's when apology becomes real. I simply acknowledged it. Quietly. Growth doesn't need applause. I no longer needed them to feel guilty. I didn't want remorse. I wanted awareness. And that, finally, was present. Forgiving them didn't require me to shrink again. I stayed exactly who I had become. Centered. Grounded. Clear. Our relationships found a new equilibrium. Less dependency. More respect. And strangely more warmth. Love felt different now. Less automatic. More intentional. And far more honest. I didn't lose myself in reconciliation. I didn't abandon my boundaries to restore closeness. That was new. And powerful. Peace is act. It wasn't dramatic. No tears. No declarations. Just consistency. Calls that came when nothing was needed. Visits that weren't rushed. Presence without expectation. That's when apology becomes real. I simply acknowledged it. Quietly. Growth doesn't need applause. I no longer needed them to feel guilty. I didn't want remorse. I wanted awareness. And that, finally, was present. Forgiving them didn't require me to shrink again. I stayed exactly who I had become. Centered. Grounded. Clear. Our relationships found a new equilibrium. Less dependency. More respect. And strangely more warmth. Love felt different now. Less automatic. More intentional. And far more honest. I didn't lose myself in reconciliation. I didn't abandon my boundaries to restore closeness. That was new. And powerful. Peace is act. It requires decisions. Repeatedly. And I was choosing it every day. Not with noise. With ease. The kind that settles into your bones. And stays. Some things didn't need to be discussed again. They had served their purpose. The lesson had been learned. There was only one thing left. Not a conversation. Not an apology. A release. And it was entirely mine to make. Time does a quiet thing when you let it. It doesn't erase the past. It softens its edges. By the time a full year had passed since Richard's memorial, the memory no longer arrived with sharpness. It came gently, like a reminder rather than a wound. On the anniversary of his passing, I didn't plan anything elaborate. No service. No gathering. Just a candle on the table and his photo beside it. This time, I wasn't alone. My children arrived without prompting. No announcements. No expectations. They came quietly, respectfully, carrying food, not excuses. No one mentioned golf. No one checked the time. Presents filled the room. There were chairs around the table. This time, none of them were empty. And yet I noticed something else. The chairs no longer held power over me. A year ago, those empty chairs had symbolized abandonment. Now they symbolized growth. Because absence had taught us what presence really meant. Not with sadness. With warmth. They shared stories I had never heard. Moments they had held privately. Regrets, yes, but also gratitude. And for the first time, I felt like we were remembering him together. They didn't need to. The way they showed up said everything. I didn't compare this moment to the memorial. I didn't measure effort. I didn't keep score. Because healing isn't about tallying wrongs. It's about choosing how much weight to carry forward. At one point, I stepped into the kitchen to refill drinks. I caught my reflection in the window. I looked peaceful, not relieved, not triumphant, just whole. Grief had stripped me, then rebuilt me. Stronger, not hardened. Softer, not broken. My children didn't lean on me the way they once did. And I didn't lean on them either. We met in the middle, where respect lives. Love no longer required sacrifice of self. It required honesty, choice, effort. If someone chooses brunch over you once, it hurts. If you teach them how to show up next time, it heals. But only if you're willing to stop shrinking. That night, after they left, I sat in the quiet again. But it wasn't lonely. I figured it out, I said softly. I learned how to let go without losing myself. I imagined his smile. Not proud, just steady. They taught me that love is visible, that grief is honest, and that self-respect is not abandonment. Closure had arrived naturally, through consistency, through presence, through change. The chairs were never the story. I didn't lose my children. I found myself. And from that place, everything else found its balance. The house settled into night, calm, complete. And for the first time since Richard's passing, I felt something close to gratitude, for the pain, for the lessons, for the strength it revealed. This story doesn't end with regret. It ends with clarity, with boundaries, with love that shows up. Never beg for presence. Make room for it. For more inspiring and heart-touching stories like this, please subscribe to our channel.